You know, I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. You know, I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.
All right. Welcome to yet another episode of Something of a Podcast, the only podcast brave enough to say, I'm something of a podcast myself. As always, I am your host, Mike Gamms, and as always with me is the incredibly talented Kai VonDoom. Say hello, Kai.
Hello, everyone.
And if you're watching on video, you may notice that you can only hear Kai, not see her. Deal with it. It's no big deal. We'll hopefully have that fixed soon. But yeah, if for those listening on the podcast, you got no idea what I'm talking about, so it don't really matter. So Kai, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing all right. The up and down weather is really fucking with my sinuses, but other than that, doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It was like 70 and then 20 in like the same day. Which is, yeah, like you said, that was a lot to deal with. Yeah, I'm mildly excited for the Oscars that are tonight. By the time this airs, they'll have already been on. But we can talk about that next week. But we're recording on Sunday, so those are tonight. We'll see how that goes. I'm more excited for the special presentation of Abbott Elementary that airs directly after the Oscars, because they didn't have it on Wednesday this week. They pushed it to Sunday. So I went to go watch it and it wasn't there. And so that's more what I'm looking forward to than the Oscars is new Abbott.
Oh yeah, that's one of the best shows on TV right now.
Absolutely. For sure. We could talk about that show more in depthly in the future as well. So I do really like that show, and there's a lot to talk about there. What else have you been watching recently?
More Love is Blind, of course.
Oh, okay. I would like to know more about Love is Blind. I have yet to watch it still, but I am very interested in what's been going on. It's still happening, right? It's ongoing.
Oh yeah, they just had the final episode before the reunion. So all the couples like had their weddings. So the thing is, like within 4 weeks of meeting each other, they have to have like these weddings that they go through. And at the altar, you could either say yes or no.
At the
One of the couple,
altar, I
yeah, at
see.
the
Is
altar.
that the first time
Yep.
they see each other?
Oh no.
No,
So
okay.
they go on like a vacation as soon as they like get out of the pods where they could see each other for the first time. So they
I
spend like
see.
a week in the Dominican Republic, then have to come back, live together for a week, and then get married.
I see. So first pods, then the vacation, then live together, then marriage, then reunion shows. That's kind of the structure.
Yep. Yeah, so it's pretty much just like a whirlwind where like they get engaged the first time they see each other, then they are immediately on a plane out of the country, then have to come back and meet their families, and then they're just getting married. So there's
That's wild.
yeah, it's insane.
And they just
And
had the
there was some
marriage episodes.
yeah, they just had the marriage episodes. Only two couples ended up making it to the altar.
What happened with Megan Fox, spelled Faux? I was trying to make a pun there, but it doesn't work unless it's written.
Yeah, fake Megan Fox and her fiance were not one of the two couples that made it to the altar.
Thumbface.
Yeah, Thumb
What's his
Boy
name?
and
Jimmy?
Jimmy. Yeah.
Thumbface
I don't
Jimmy?
trust a grown man. Yeah, I don't trust a grown man who calls himself Jimmy in the first place. That's a child's nickname.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't go by Mikey, really. Not since I was in like the third grade. So, it there was not a happy ending for fake Megan Fox and Thumbface Jimmy.
Nope, they're allegedly back together after the show,
Oh
but they
God.
did not get married.
Run, girl, run.
So another one of the notorious couples this season was this guy, Clay, and his fiance, AD. So the whole
Okay, I heard
time,
something. I've seen that name
yeah,
floating around.
yeah, so Clay has been telling AD all season, I'm scared that I'm gonna cheat on you. Like it's not completely in his control. He'll sit her down and go, my biggest fear is that I'm gonna cheat on you. And no lie, he told her, my dad cheated on my mom, Will Smith cheated, P. Diddy cheated. So how am I not gonna cheat?
Oh my goodness.
It's like, what do Will Smith and P. Diddy have to do with you? These men don't know you at all. You are a grown man.
Those are
So
his
they
role
make it to
models.
the, yeah,
P Diddy
they make it
P
to the
Diddy did a lot of
altar.
other things besides cheat. Are you
Oh
gonna do
yeah,
that too?
cheating is the least of his issues.
Correct.
So they made it to the altar and she says yes. He looks at her and goes, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me grow so much as a man. I love you. I could see a life with you, but no, I cannot marry you.
Okay, that's interesting. How could you see a
Yeah,
life but not marry? Is he just like not into the marriage thing?
it's because he's so scared that he's gonna cheat because his dad
Oh,
and P.
still just
Diddy have
because he's a
cheated.
cheat. So it's okay if he cheats on a person he has a life with, but it's not he can't cheat on his wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Is he, you think he's just trying to, was he just trying to leverage all of this to try to get her to like agree to an open marriage or something, or allow him to be able to go hunting for strange or whatever he wants to do?
Yeah, I think he just wants to date her because he's like, okay, that's just my girlfriend. I'm not cheating on my wife. It's not as bad.
I see. How is she taking
But there
this?
Oh, she was devastated, but there was a really good conversation that came out of it between Clay's parents, actually. So his cheating ass daddy, his mom goes, you have given your son so many issues, and he can't be in a relationship now
Yeah.
because you cheated the whole time he was a kid. Like his dad would take him with him while he was like going to see the other women.
Oh man, so he's like in the car, or in there, like yeah, exactly. That's wow. What's this guy look like, by the way, Clay? Is he another toe face?
He's okay looking. Like if you saw him, you wouldn't think he was ugly or anything, but he also is not very memorable.
Does he look like a guy that would be on a dating show though? Like,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. They always got type that they're kind of like that similar kind of guy.
Yeah, he has like that similar haircut, stature, kind of dresses the same as all those other like dating show
Mm.
guys.
And what about her? Was there like some big reveal there, or was there not like some were they either of them shocked when they saw each other or anything like that?
I don't think so, but a big thing with AD this season was everyone would comment on how big her butt is. So that was kind of like a recurring thing with all of the cast members.
I see. So everyone would talk about her butt, and they didn't realize she had uh that baby had back until
Yeah.
they got out the pods.
Yeah, and she was the only black woman, so it's like all these white guys and white
Oh,
women being like, "Oh, her butt's so big, it's so juicy, she's
I
stacked."
see.
So there's
I
like this
wasn't thinking
weird,
this.
yeah,
I think you said that she was a black woman, but in my head I was, I see. Because I was just, yeah, okay. So yeah, that's got some racial, some microaggressions at the very least.
yeah. So I hope they bring it up on the reunion, but I doubt
He's
it.
white, Clay.
No, Clay is also black.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Got it, right. Yeah, you said that. Right, okay. So, yeah, and so they're just ended like that then if he left her at the altar?
Yeah, so they're done, allegedly.
And then the
You
reunion
gotta,
show will be soon, right?
Yes, the reunion comes out in 3 days. So
I
it takes
see.
place, it's a year after the show was filmed.
Oh, so they filmed
So,
these a while over a year ago.
yep,
I see. That's wild. And so they wait until a year later to film the reunions.
yep. So a lot
Um,
of the couples, if they've been married, then we check in on them their first year of marriage.
I
But
see.
most of the people, it's just like, okay, we get to see, do they get back together after they got dumped at the altar? And a lot of times they do.
I see. Interesting. So did the reunion show, didn't they try to like Netflix do that live one time? And it was like
Oh
a,
yeah,
a whole disaster, right?
it was horrible. I think
Yeah.
it ended up being running 2 or 3 hours after it was supposed to air.
And there was problems with the like launch of it and all this stuff. I heard about it. But now
Mhm.
I understand what that was. Is it was that's the reunion like a year later, and so that makes sense that it would be a like why they could do it live because they filmed the show a year ago, and so like they're waiting and to do this part. So the reunions that are going to air in like 3 days, they probably filmed relatively recently, maybe.
Yeah. It's also interesting to see if Netflix ever tries again to do live TV because it's like at the end
They
of the
want
day, we're starting
to.
to circle back around to cable.
Right, we're just recreating cable. That's kind
Yeah.
of we reinvent things that were already there. And first they start them out really cheap so that we get addicted to those and hooked on them, and it breaks all the other systems, and then they just jack the prices right back up to what they used to like. It's same thing with Uber and taxi cabs and
Yep.
streamers and cable. It's all the same shit. We replace one with the other, then it rises in price. I digress. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if they do try to do a live event. Then I've heard that Netflix is trying to get into that world as well, particularly in the sports world, because that's big money. And we've seen Amazon and Peacock get into that game, that market
It
recently.
was so, yeah, it was very stressful this NFL season when games were only airing on streaming.
Yeah, everyone in the country had to teach their dad, their uncle, their mom how to use those apps, you know?
Yep.
Every week I was like, I had to check to make sure what channel the game was on and find out, and then would have to let like several different relatives know and then try to explain to them how to do it. And I didn't even really know which one it was going to be on. So yeah, it's also they could make more money,
Yep.
their subscriptions went way up. But yeah, so well, I look forward to hearing about the reunion shows next week, which will have aired by then. Anything
Oh
else
yeah.
about Love is Blind I should know? Or we should know, I should say?
Yeah, I will say the one couple that ended up getting married, I don't think they're gonna last. That's my Love is Blind prediction, is that they will be
I
broken up
see.
by the reunion.
So we're gonna find out soon. So there's a prediction. You heard it here first, folks. That's a something of a podcast exclusive prediction. It's something of a prediction, you could say. What's their names, you said?
Johnny and Amy.
Johnny and Amy. I'm gonna follow
Yeah,
up
their
on
thing
that.
is Johnny didn't want to have sex with Amy because she's not on birth control. And he was just like, I don't trust condoms. So you got to
Go
get on birth control or
go
we
get a
can't have sex.
vasectomy then, bud.
Yeah, he refused to do that as well.
Weird. People have weird hangups.
Yeah,
And it's yeah, they're just like create all these rules for themselves in their lives, and it's like you made the rules. Like you're making up imaginary rules, and then forcing like you're it's basically like painting your backing yourself into a corner.
yeah.
But that's cool. Well, I'm interested to I will follow up with you next week about Johnny and Amy. I'm sure I will hear some, little tidbits about it along the way on Twitter and whatnot. But that's yeah, I've never gotten into Love is Blind, but maybe when we're done after continuing to do this podcast, you'll have turned me into a Love Is Blind junkie as well.
It's terrible.
Terrible television.
Yes, it's the epitome of trash TV.
I do like trash. But I guess so. The opposite of trash would be what? Prestige television, right?
Yes.
So that's my attempt at a segue into our our next topic.
That was smooth.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Um, if you think that's smooth, you should see my dating game. Oh God. So yes. Do you want me to start this one or what?
No, I can start it.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
So we have both decided to rewatch the classic HBO show, The Wire, one of the greatest shows of all time, for sure. And you recently saw the first episode, am I correct? Just the first?
Yes.
Or
And
how
this
many?
isn't a
Okay.
rewatch for me. This is a first time
Oh,
watch.
this is a first time watch. All right. Yeah,
A
so I'd
rewatch
love
for
to.
you. Yeah.
It's a rewatch for me after a few years of not seeing it and your first time watch. So I would
Yeah.
love to hear what you thought of the first episode.
Yeah. So I watched just the pilot. I know you're a little bit ahead of me on your rewatch. I'm gonna try to catch up. So The Wire, I have never watched for what, 20 years. I never watched it. And up until about halfway through the pilot, like the first episode that I watched just last night, I thought that The Wire was a prison show.
Oh, you were thinking of Oz,
That
huh?
is Oz, correct.
Yeah.
And so I've come to realize that it is basically a cops and robbers show where you're
hmm
seeing a groups of cops and the um like what do you call it? Like a criminal enterprise, so to speak, or whatever, and the workings of that, and you're seeing both sides of it, kind of.
hmm
And it's like a crime drama or whatever. So it is. I okay. I'm interested about the pilot. I want to watch more of the show, but that caught me off guard that it wasn't a prison show. I was like, oh, that's the other show, right? Um, and so the other thing I knew about this show, I knew so going in, I knew three things, and one of them was wrong. One of them was that it was a prison show. The second thing I knew about this show going in is that it's what put where we got Michael B. Jordan from, basically.
Yeah.
Aside
hmm
from a very small one episode role as a child in The Sopranos, which is what led to The Wire, he's
hmm
from the first episode predominantly featured and very young, much younger than I had thought he would be. I'm not sure how old he is there. It's like 2002, 2003,
hmm
but he definitely looks like I think he's playing 15.
Yeah, he is. He's playing a
Right.
young teenager.
Um, and then I also noticed, of course, pretty quickly that Idris Elba is in the show, and I've since come to realize that this is probably where Idris Elba came from,
Yep.
like in terms of what put him on the map. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I do like Idris Elba a lot, so I was very excited about that. Um, and then Wood Harris, who also is like, I can't remember the name of the guy he's playing, but he's like with Idris Elba. They're like the two
hmm
main higher up guys or whatever.
Yep.
Um, and I like him. He's in a whole bunch of movies, and most recently he's in Creed, all the Creed movies. He plays the younger like the son of the trainer of Apollo Creed from the first series, and he's now the new trainer. And he's that's like I like him in that. So the cast already, my first thought is like, wow, the cast is really good, and I definitely want to watch more of it. So the third thing that I knew about this show is that there's somebody named Omar.
Yes.
And so after watching the pilot, I haven't seen Omar. So I guess he comes in very soon, shortly, but he's not in the first episode.
No, he's not in the pilot, but he will be showing up soon. He is in the first
However,
season.
in the very first scene of the show, the opening of the pilot, there's like some sort of crime scene and there's like a murder or something. And I'm pretty sure that they said that somebody's name was Omar, but it was just like a
Yes.
throwaway Omar. It's not the same Omar.
Mhm.
So, or not throwaway, but like it's a different Omar. So I was confused. I was like, oh wait, I thought this Omar was like the main, like one of the main things of the show, main characters. And then I saw like a dead guy named Omar and was very confused. But then, yeah, and then my, I'm very curious what the wire is. You know, there's got to be
Yeah.
a wire. Someone's wearing a wire. That's, I guess, kind of the
Yes.
mystery of it, right? Is you want to like who is the rat kind of show, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna try not to spoil anything. That's why I had you go first.
Yeah.
So, The Wire came out 22 years ago now, which is insane. So I'm only 31. I did not watch the show when it first came out. I discovered it as an adult. With that and The Sopranos, I had kind of seen a few episodes from my parents watching it, and then they'd just be like, "Hey, you're too young. Get out of the room. Go watch cartoons somewhere." And so it was one of those things where like the first time I watched it, I had like a lot of the missing context from just like snippets I had seen as a child.
Mm,
But the show, especially in the first episode, has this appearance where it's like propaganda a little bit. Like
yeah.
some people who kind of misunderstand what the writers were trying to do think the show is like pro cop. You're supposed to be rooting for McNulty and you're supposed to be rooting for the cops to take these kids down. But I don't think that's in the writing. I think that's something that's in people's inherent racial biases and
That they
the
choose to
fact that
root for those people.
this country is so programmed to root for cops. Those are the good guys. When in reality, the show is a reflection of how the war on drugs destroys the Black community, especially in a place like Baltimore, where it's so
Mhm.
police presence is so heavy and poverty is so extreme. So we see these young characters like Michael B. Jordan's character getting absorbed into this like kind of, drug dealing lifestyle. And these are the people we're supposed to feel bad for. These are people we're supposed
Mhm.
to be rooting for. We're rooting for them to survive and we're rooting for them to, not get taken down by people like McNulty. However, there are characters like Stringer Bell, who's played by Idris Elba,
Yeah, that's
and
his name,
Avon
Stringer Bell.
Barksdale, who's
That's
played
Wood
by, yeah,
Harris. Yeah, yeah.
yes. So those characters are kind of, especially as the show goes on, like those evil drug dealers that are supposed to be taken down. But really, the reality of it is there's like McNulty is the good cop. A lot of the other cops are crooked. Stringer Bell is
Right.
the bad drug dealer, but most of the drug dealers are just victims of circumstance. So as the show goes on, you start to see how that can impact the community and how it's not so black and white, like the cops are good guys, these black drug dealers are bad guys. A lot of times it's just people trying to survive.
I
And the
see.
thing with Omar, and I won't say too much about him since you haven't seen him yet, but he was played by, and it's killing me that I can't think of the actor's name. Let
Oh,
me
he
Google
just
it really
passed
quick.
away. He just passed
Yeah,
away, right? I think his name's Michael something.
Michael. Yeah, hold on. I'm just having a huge brain frog today. Okay, Michael K. Williams played
Yeah, that's
Omar.
right.
So
Mhm.
he's a straight man playing this gay character on this HBO show.
I
And at the
see.
time, it wasn't as common, to have gay characters in shows like this that
Yeah, I
weren't
thought there
played
was like
as
a
a joke.
queer element to the show. I thought that that was something that I had kind of sponge brain absorbed, but I didn't. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but
Mhm.
that makes
Oh,
sense.
you're good.
Yeah, it's familiar.
Yeah. So one thing about Michael K. Williams was he made sure that Omar was never played as a joke. He wasn't the comic relief. He still had just as strong of a storyline as everyone else. And he had gay relationships on the show where we saw his boyfriends. We saw him being affectionate with his boyfriends. And he was still this like terrifying character who still had all this depth to him. So it was one of the best portrayals of like Black homosexuality that I've
Mm,
seen in a TV show, especially to be played by a straight man and to have him take it so seriously.
I
So I
see.
can't wait till you see Omar on the show, and I would love to hear what you think of the character.
Yeah, he's in this season, right? First season.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm sure I'll get caught up soon. I figure we'll check in along the way until we get sort of caught up. And, it's not like every episode we're going to talk about, break down each episode, but I think it'd be kind of fun to go over it as we go,
Yeah.
And so folks at home, if you're listening, if you've watched The Wire, you should watch it. If you haven't, you should watch it. If you want to play along, we'll try not to be, too spoiler heavy on something that came out 22 years ago. So it's not like you'll have to have seen it to be able to enjoy whatever conversation we have about it. But yeah. Right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so well, I'm excited though. I'm liking it so far. It's yeah, like I said, it wasn't exactly what I expected. I thought it was a prison show at first, and then I see it was like a cops and robbers kind of show. And like you said, there is a hint where it sort of felt like a little bit propaganda-y at the beginning, or like it could be, just because you're like seeing the cops' perspective. But I have like faith that it's really going to just kind of expose the imperfections of the institutions and systems and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to really getting into it, because one episode you're just barely meeting the characters and trying to keep them straight and stuff.
Yep.
So I look forward to diving into that.
Also, you got to think in 2002, right after 9/11, you can't just like come in guns blazing like fuck the police, they're racist as hell.
Right.
I mean, you can, but who knows if HBO would have put money behind it or if people would have kept watching it. So you got to kind of ease people into that.
Right. Exposing that kind of stuff. And speaking of the 9/11 thing, that's like, even from the pilot, it's very present that this is a post 9/11 world, like a freshly post 9/11 world. And it has the same, like, at least from the pilot, the briefly that it was mentioned, it's essentially like that's what the feds and that's what our government has put all their focus on was, um, Islamophobia, essentially,
Yep.
and all of that, which meant that meant criminal communities that had previously been, super pressed, had some slight relief in that because the feds were focused otherwise, kind of thing. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and that's like a thing in Sopranos as well, but which is interesting. Yeah, you can't have if it's something is going to take place in the criminal world in that period, particularly on the East Coast, it's going to have to, it's going to address that. So that's, yeah, interesting. But yeah, so I guess that's about it for the Wire for this week. Yeah, I guess we did have one other thing on the agenda we wanted to talk about before we take a break. Should we go on to that?
Yeah, let's get into it. You want to
Yeah.
introduce that?
Yeah, sure. I can get into this. So I guess I'll start with it's related in part to the conversation we just had, and then it's related to prestige television. But I'll start where I start. It won't seem like that, but we'll get there. And so there is a new bill that was just put forth in the Senate in Florida that would basically ban cities, states, counties, or not cities, not states, cities, counties, towns in Florida from having a minimum requirement for water breaks for their employees, for companies to have on their employees, meaning that like the county and towns and cities couldn't mandate that businesses or employers had to provide proper water breaks and water for their employees. And it removed those protections, or would remove those protections if it passes in Florida. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's kind of a part of the war on water, which is just one of the many ways in which they, water is a basic human right. Water is life, I'm a firm believer in that. And they have continued to, capitalize and monopolize water so much so that we have to pay for water. It's treated like a commodity when it's actually like a basic human need and a basic human right for survival. And so it's an attack on a basic, it's stripping us of a basic human right of workers of being allowed to have water while they're working. And it's not the only bill that's been an attack on water, so to speak, in this kind of way. And that's the bill that was put forth in Georgia and passed, and is a law now in Georgia that
Mhm.
passed in 2021, which is that basically bans you're not allowed to give people waiting in line to vote water.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. So in Georgia, you can't give people waiting in line to vote water. It doesn't matter how hot it is or how long they've been waiting in line. You can't give them water. And it's been a backdrop for this current season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, because at the end of last season, Larry David's character gives a bottle of water to a woman standing in line that he knows. So he knows her, he's having a conversation with her, gives her a bottle of water, and then he's arrested. Like, it seems like something that's just so silly that it could only happen in Curb Your Enthusiasm, but this is a real life law. Like, our human rights are being stripped in front of our very eyes, and it's like at the point where it's almost comical, but it's
Yeah.
really happening.
And so the Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's in the it started out this season, first episode of the year, like this all happens, and he gets arrested for giving the person water. And on the show, it's a very Larry David moment where it's like he's getting, like, whenever Larry David gets praised for doing something good, it wasn't his intention to do something good. It was an accident, generally. And so it sort of plays on that storyline. But uh, because of this episode, literally the Secretary of State of Georgia had to make a statement about Curb Your Enthusiasm. And essentially they try to sugarcoat this law and say, well, that's a humorous misinterpretation of what the law is, which is supposedly supposed to stop people from illegally campaigning too close to an election place. And basically they've used it as a loophole to include the water into, like, what they would call, like influencing at a polling place, like campaigning at a too close to a polling place. So they like to pretend like, oh, the law is only about that, but in reality, no, this is a very real law. And that's exactly why it is in this season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Is Larry David saw the law. I read an interview somewhere. He saw the law a few years ago, like when it passed, and was like, this is so ridiculous. We need to write this in. And then that's brought Larry David to Georgia, and he got arrested in Atlanta, and he has a mugshot in the same court as Donald Trump, parodying kind of Donald Trump's situation there. And so it's not only parodying reality and parallels with reality, and that it's a real law, and that this happened, like Trump was elected there. There's those things, but the season with the idea of Larry David being in jail in the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm is like a parallel to the Seinfeld finale. So it's kind of meta in several different ways and all kind of related. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the actual final episode is going to be. Since you bring up the Seinfeld parallel, I wonder if they're going to just like, kind of do the same thing, but in an opposite direction. I'm really curious to see
Right.
where they go from here.
Yeah, they're either setting it up to have a similar end, but either way, there's that's part of it's part of it. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence. It's either going to make a commentary on it, or it's going to redo it, or it's going to like set up something where or it's a bait and switch where it's wants you to think that's what we're going to do. But I'm curious to see how much more they dig into the political stuff.
Yeah.
As Larry David's gotten a little more political, he's definitely a centrist liberal. And that, if he didn't play Bernie Sanders on Saturday Night Live, he probably would have been anti-Bernie. But he's related to him. But uh, yeah, so to be interested to see where Curb Your Enthusiasm goes. And it'll be interesting to see where these, bills that are trying to take away our water rights or a right to basic water goes,
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on that?
No, that's about all I had.
Yeah, me too. Um, yeah, so I think then we're gonna take a quick break and then we will be back to discuss our top 3 movies directed by women, right? In honor of International Women's Month. Is that what the title of it is, right?
Yes.
International Women's Month. Cool. So, all right, we'll be back with that.
Hey everyone, welcome back from that break. I know you probably weren't on break, but I took a little nap, had some snacks, I'm ready to go. So we're gonna do our top 3 this week. In honor of International Women's Month, we're gonna do our top 3 favorite films directed by women. So it also ties into the fact that Oscars are this week, so we're gonna talk about some movies. So, Mike, do you want to go first and give us one of your 3 picks?
Sure. I suppose I could go first. All right. So my my first pick for one of my top 3 movies directed by women, we once again need to journey back to the year 1992, which is a coincidence. Again, it's the year you were born, right?
Yep.
Yep. And so my pick is the classic 1992 film Wayne's World, directed by
Oh, I
Penelope
love Wayne's.
Spheris.
That's
Yep.
such a good choice.
Are you familiar with Wayne's World, right?
Yes, of course.
So Wayne's World is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's one of the most influential movies to me ever, and not just to me, to so many other people, to so much of comedy. It was hugely pivotal, and is also I specifically bring up Wayne's World to not just talk about the movie Wayne's World, but this topic is about the top movies directed by women. But to talk about Wayne's World director Penelope Spheris, who directed Wayne's World. Okay, so let me see. Where do I want to start? I have a lot of notes I wrote about Wayne's World because that's going to be the ones I talk about the most. Um, so first, before I get into Penelope Spheris, let me go over a couple points about why I think Wayne's World is such a iconic movie. There is so many incredible lines that are quotable forever, like swing and just like all the things. And most in that regard, the line "That's what she said" everybody thinks came from The Office, came from Michael Scott. Nope, came from Wayne's World. Um, uh, Wayne's World is such a great movie that it made the song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen chart higher on the charts than it did when it was originally released.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And um yeah, that was like a point that Mike Myers had to actually fight for, was to keep the song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen in it. So I want to get into Penelope Spheris, the director of this film, of the first Wayne's World movie. Are you familiar with Penelope Spheris at all?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. So she is a badass. So she was at first most known for directing this series of documentaries called The Decline of Western Civilization. And the first one is about came out in like 1981 and is about punk rock. And then the next one is about heavy metal, and I can't remember what the third one is about. But she's like this really great rock and roll documentary director. And she had previously, and when she first started her career, she was directing shorts for the first season of Saturday Night Live for Albert Brooks. And she walked away from doing like comedy to go do her real passion, which was she was like a punk rock girl and to do like music documentary stuff. And she was, yeah. So, and then Lorne Michaels came to her to direct the Wayne's World movie. And this was the first, I want to say the first feature that she directed, like first narrative feature she directed after being a sort of a punk rock director. And she really had a very tough job on this movie because she was dealing with the very, very large egos of three men, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, and Lorne Michaels, who all wanted to direct like a different movie. Basically, they all had different ideas of how the movie was going to go. And I don't want to go too much into all this stuff. But I will say is that so Penelope Spheris directed Wayne's World 1 and she didn't direct Wayne's World 2. And so there was a time in one of the late stages when Mike Myers was still continuing to give her notes and notes and notes after she made the final cut. And he gave her all these notes and she that was for like the 8 millionth time, and she kept the same cut. She refused to make the changes. So the final Wayne's World movie, the one that was so successful, is because Penelope Spheris was so believed in herself and her work so much that she stuck by it. And she was basically told, if you go against that right now, you probably won't be asked to direct the sequel. And sure enough, that's what happened. And so she was willing to like risk her career for her art to make what she thought would be the best movie. And so I think she's really awesome. And she also then directed a bunch of other comedy movies. She did Black Sheep, which is the Chris Farley and David Spade movie after Tommy Boy, the other one. And also, oh, I can't forget this, the iconic Little Rascals from the 90s. That was her. And what's most impressive, I think, is that Wayne's World was made on a budget of $12 million. And it grossed over $138 million. Was a huge, massive hit. And yeah, okay, I've said enough about that for now. What are your thoughts about Wayne's World?
I'm definitely gonna have to look more into the director. I didn't know she also did Little Rascals. I loved that movie so much as a kid. I actually have gone as Garth for Halloween at least 3 times.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
I wanted to do Wayne this year since I'd done Garth so many times, but we'll see.
That's awesome. I've never actually done a Wayne and Garth Halloween costume, but the movie is just like it's so it's so great. It's so perfect. It's so damn funny. It has Ed O'Neill is hilarious in this movie. Chris Farley is hilarious in it. Um, bringing in Tia Carrera, who plays all of her own music. She's just awesome. And directing a movie like a comedy like this is no easy task. Not only is she dealing with like all those stuff, like I said, but there's also sort of really kind of interesting format issues. The camera itself, not issues, the camera itself is a character. The director of the movie is there's like a fourth wall break in the movie throughout the movie. Wayne talks to the camera. There's a television show, like a documentary filming him. And so it's, that's like the direction of that. And every time that they film like Ed O'Neill and he's doing those really dark rants that he does, it's like the way that it's shot is, yeah, I love everything about this movie. And it's what made Mike Myers a huge, huge star. Like, yes, this sketch had already been successful on Saturday Night Live and was one of their like most popular sketches, which but no one expected it to be like this big. And Mike Myers now has made how many successful franchises? He's got Wayne's World, Austin Powers, Shrek, and it all
Mhm.
kind of started from like this movie. If Wayne's World, the first movie, wasn't as good as it was, if Wayne's World, that movie, was directed poorly, turned out shitty, everything would have been different. It changed, the trajectory of all those folk. And interestingly enough, it was a screenplay written by Bonnie and Terry Turner, who are most known for being the creators of that '70s show shortly after.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's just like, yeah, all kinds of um really great things and great people involved with this movie. And what was I gonna say? Oh, so it it really helped, like I said, with Queen. It made Queen a number 2 on the charts. It put it back on the charts higher than it ever was before that. And Mike Myers actually had to fight to get that song, Bohemian Rhapsody, which I can't hear that song without thinking of that scene for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
my entire life. You think of them headbanging in the car. Lorne Michaels wanted to change it to Guns N' Roses because they were more popular then. And this is 1992. Queen is a little bit past their prime, but
Mhm.
Mike Myers insisted on it being Queen. And it kind of, some people might credit it as really um, putting Queen back into the spotlight and sort of elevating their status. So I also read this really interesting fact is that so before the movie was released, they got a copy of Wayne's World to Brian May from Queen, and Freddie Mercury, before he died, shortly after this, saw the movie and loved it. So they were able to get the movie to Freddie Mercury before he died because it was, I believe, released after he passed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then to come full circle, Mike Myers then has a cameo in Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie.
I still haven't seen that
Me
movie.
neither, but I know that he does, you know. And so okay, that's yeah, it's yeah, I could keep going, but that's how I feel about Wayne's World. I love that movie. The second one is good too. Don't get me wrong. I do like Wayne's World too, but Wayne's World 1 is just like so it's so iconic, the Scooby-Doo ending.
Mhm.
And like I've mentioned before that one of my favorite like styles of comedy has been combining rock and roll and comedy, and like this exact subgenre. I cannot emphasize enough like how influential Wayne's World has been to me. Like one of the first web series sketches I ever made was almost basically a Wayne's World show. It was a metal talk show. I don't think we would have that metal show on VH1 if it wasn't for Wayne's World. And the whole idea of doing public access show as like a comedy thing, where it's just like these two guys in their basement hosting a talk show, is kind of how Wayne's World started. We've seen that so much since then, and they were kind of innovators in the doing the public access thing, even though it's fake public access, but just existing in that world. And I mean, Alice Cooper's in this damn movie. I could just go on and on. Okay, I'm sorry. That's enough about that. I could just ranted about Wayne's World for way too long, but I love that movie. And yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's an excellent first pick for sure. That movie
so
still holds up so well. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna pass it off to you. What is your first pick?
So my first pick is completely opposite. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with American Psycho directed by Mary Herron. Controversial
I
choice, I know.
see.
So
That's Christian Bale.
yes. Currently the movie is pretty much known for like all the Christian Bale memes that have been going around. But I
Right.
think it's one of as you know, I'm a huge horror fan. This movie is so brilliant to me. It's just a good takedown of just like the insidious nature of capitalism and white privilege. Have you seen the movie?
If I did, it was a long time ago, and I don't really remember it. I might have watched it when I
So,
was in film school. I think so, but I don't remember much about it.
mhm. So basically, we follow this character, Patrick Bateman. He's a, rich businessman. He has the looks, he has the hot girlfriend, he has
He's
the
got the
clothes, he
business
has
card, right?
everything. Yep. He has everything that you're supposed to want in life. But it's never enough for him because somebody else has a hotter girlfriend or somebody else is making more money. So his kind of foil in the movie is played by Jared Leto. So Jared Leto's
Oh,
character is always more handsome, has a better business card, even with a classier font. And it's just like all these little things in his life that just nothing's adding up. There's always some hole. He can't fill it with money or designer clothes or big breasted blonde women. So it gets to a point where he starts murdering people for fun.
because that's the
And
only way he can get his endorphins.
yes, so that's how he's like kind of, getting his rocks off is by murdering women in these brutal ways.
Women,
So the movie,
particularly.
particularly women, he does kill a few men, but it's the focus is mostly on the women that he murders. So the thing is, the book that this movie is based on was written by a man, Bret Easton Ellis.
Oh,
And
I see. Okay.
yes, so a lot of the criticism of the book is that it's very misogynist and it really focuses on these brutal murders of women. And what Mary Herron did is kind of, focus on the toxic masculinity aspect and like how it was capitalism that was poisoning him and making him think his life is never enough, that he just has to keep filling it with things until women are just completely
I
objects to him.
see. That's
So it
really
starts with
interesting.
yeah. So she kind of takes a really sexist novel, misogynist novel that's just about, oh, let's just read graphic murders of women to turn it into like this real social commentary. And there's a thing
That's
about
a
this movie
really
that you don't,
excellent point. Sorry, I don't mean to.
yeah,
That's a really strong point that really resonates with me. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Because it's like you're saying Bret Easton Ellis is very misogynistic, like source material or whatever, not the best,
mhm,
but then her, like running it through her lens is what made it so much better. She was able to improve upon it by adding her perspective and take on it.
yeah. So she definitely turned it into something that was, whenever people bring up how misogynist horror as a genre is, they'll bring up American Psycho. And it's because I know they haven't seen it. They just think, okay, it's Christian Bale just murdering women for fun. But when you watch the movie, it's filmed with such care towards the female characters. You don't see any of this gore or like, you don't see women being ripped apart the way it's described in the novel. You just see, kind of it's based on like his feelings of never feeling enough. Like the business card scene is made fun of a lot, but it's
Hmm.
like he's spending all this money to make sure even his business cards are perfect. He can't have a single hair out of place. He has to have the right designer clothes and the right blonde woman, but there's always someone with more or better. And so as a man, he feels inadequate and has to use women as objects and murder them to feel some type of fulfillment.
I
And so it's
see.
like a really interesting commentary both on the book and society at large. I haven't seen too much of Mary Herron's work outside of this, but her first film is called I Shot Andy Warhol. It's based on Valerie Solanas, which is a a lesbian feminist woman who was
Hmm.
known for attempting to murder Andy Warhol, and something called the Scum Manifesto, which is basically telling women to leave men behind and overthrow the government. So
I see.
she has a very controversial filmography, but
I
I have to
see.
give my flowers to her. I love American Psycho.
I also seen that she co-wrote the screenplay with Guinevere Turner, who's also a woman, and they partnered together a lot, it looks like. But it further emphasizes the point that you made, that it was they took this novel written by a man that only had this man's perspective on this character and added this whole other lens that made it a fully like developed, fully rounded story like that. Like it gets both. Yeah, that's great. That's a great pick. I'll have to go watch that. I haven't, like I said, I may have seen it. I think I saw it when I was like, you know, a film school stoner, but I might have forgotten it. Uh, that's a great choice. Yeah. And it was kind of early in Christian Bale's career too, right? And Jared Leto, I would say.
Yeah, it was definitely early in Jared Leto's acting career. I think he was on Jared Leto was on like the sitcom. Yeah,
My
like a kind
So-Called
of
Life, I
teen
think it was.
drama, My
Yeah.
So-Called Life. Yep.
And he had made a
So
couple
he
movies
was
in the 90s, but nothing like, yeah.
yeah, so this was like one of his first. This and Fight Club are the two movies that had him seen as like a more serious
Mm.
actor.
And Christian Bale, this is kind of what put him on the map out. 2000, that was when this movie came out.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
So
when and then after that, he was like the star of a whole bunch of movies. He was like, that's when, you know, became
I
Mr.
honestly think this role is why he got Bruce Wayne. So
Mm, yeah, I could see that. That makes sense. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch it. It's a horror movie or more of like a thriller?
um, I'd say it's kind of horror. Yeah.
Okay.
Not a lot of gore or anything though.
All right, I'll have to revisit that one. Oh, I guess it
Yeah.
anything else we want to say about American Psycho, or should I go into my second pick?
Yeah, let's hear your second pick.
Yeah, let's keep it moving. So my second pick is um in the similar vein as my first pick, but a different. So we're gonna travel a couple years from there, and we're gonna go back to 1995, and we're gonna talk about which is arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, comedy movie ever made, and that, of course, is the 1995 classic Billy Madison, directed by Tamra
Oh yes.
Davis. You're familiar with Billy Madison, I'm sure, right?
Yes, I love that movie.
Yeah, Billy Madison is just an incredible movie. It's hilarious from opening scene to end. It's ridiculous. It has musical number randomly in the middle of it. It's um it's awesome. I love, Billy Madison. It I would be sort of a broken record just talking about how great Billy Madison is. It's like the first really what put Adam Sandler on the map. It was his big sort of, you know, big first starring role in a major movie. Oh, so one thing I want to add is, so my previous pick, Wayne's World, right? Wayne's World, when it came out, Ebert and Roper, or Siskel and Ebert, or whoever it was, they actually liked it. They said Wayne's World was good and was one of the best movies of 1992. Flash forward to 1995. Billy Madison comes out, and um, Roger Ebert said it was one of the worst movies he'd ever seen. Billy and Adam Sandler would never be a lead man, and he was much more suited to play a villain or a side character. So it's so funny to me that they were so off with that prediction, right? Um, but yeah, so Billy Madison, for a number of reasons, is one of my favorite movies. It's the first movie to feature Norm Macdonald, which he's just absolutely great in that movie. Chris Farley as the bus driver, incredible performance. Um, it's one of the most quoted comedy movies. It's like I said, it would be sort of a broken record to go, not a broken record, it'd be saying something that's been said a lot to talk about how great Billy Madison is. But since we were talking about movies directed by women, and this was directed by Tamra Davis, I wanted to talk more about Tamra Davis. So not only did she direct Billy Madison, she also directed Half Baked. So those are
Oh,
like, that's her big claim to fame. Of those two, she did those two movies, right? And she did some other stuff as well. But before Tamra Davis directed Billy Madison, she was a music video director, like a big time music video director in the end of the 80s, early 90s. like did Run DMC music videos, Sonic Youth, New Kids on the Block, all like Depeche Mode, sorry. And was like uh a pretty big, like she directed the music video for Bust a Move by Young MC, like big music videos. And a lot of it was in the emerging sort of hip hop world as well, music videos and stuff. And so she came to do Billy Madison and was never had done comedy before that, but then kind of came into this world. And in part, she what am I trying to get at here? Okay, so I'll say this. And so a big reason why I bring up this movie is that I actually had the pleasure of going to a screening of Billy Madison with a Q&A. It was a double feature, Billy Madison and then Half Baked right after it. And in between was a Q&A with the director, Tamara Davis. So I actually got to meet the director of Billy Madison, and I watched Billy Madison in theaters like right before this conversation. So she was being interviewed by this comedian Aaron Ross from Los Angeles. This was at the Alamo Drafthouse in Los Angeles, and getting to hear her story about how they brought in her, and she had not done comedy before and sort of had to learn on the fly what she was doing, about how to, or not what she was doing, but how to adjust to comedy. And yeah, I think that was probably about it I had written down for Billy Madison. I'm sure you enjoy Billy Madison, right?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. It's so funny. Another one that holds up well for sure. Okay. I'll move on to my second pick since, we're on time constraints. I'll
Oh
try to
yeah.
be brief.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I've been talking
It's
too long.
it's okay. We're still working out the kinks with this podcast stuff. So, my second movie, tying it into this current Oscar season, is actually from a first-time director who is nominated for a ton of awards this season. Not enough though. So, I'm going with Past Lives, directed by Celine Song.
I see. I have not seen this one.
Okay, have you heard of it?
I have. Remind me which one it is. I know it's one of the Best Picture nominees. Who's in it?
Yep. So, Greta Lee is in it. That's pretty much the only, you know, I would say famous actor in it. So she plays the lead. There's a Korean actor who, have if a lot of my friends haven't seen this movie. A lot of people have been hesitant to watch it because it's mostly in Korean,
Mm,
or I would say at least half of the movie is in Korean. But it's a beautiful film, and it kind of brings fresh air to the romance genre because it doesn't end the way you think it will. So I'm
oh,
going to spoil this movie because I can't talk about it without talking about the ending. So if you don't want past live spoilers, I guess skip this section. But there's two childhood best friends. The movie starts off with them in South Korea where they meet and they're like going to high school together. And we learn that the girl is going to be moving to Canada. So
I see.
so they're kind of like, ending their little cute high school romance, middle school romance. And they move apart. They think that's going to be the end, but then they reconnect in college when, social media is starting to come out. So they're able to connect over Facebook and they just talk constantly. And you just see over different decades, they keep reconnecting again. So it starts off, they're middle
Oh, yeah.
schoolers.
I think I saw a
They,
trailer for this now that you describe it. Yeah.
Mhm. So the final time they reconnect, he kind of on a whim, she's now living in New York City. The guy goes and visits her in New York City, just like on a whim, decides to go to the United States because he's been in Korea this whole time. He goes and visits her in New York City. Now she's mostly speaking English, kind of lost touch with her culture, hasn't been back to Korea since she left. And he's in this new country where he doesn't speak the language. And she also has, a white husband who a lot of the movie focuses on her husband, who's like, I don't have this connection that you two have. You speak the same language. You've known each other since you were children. I feel like I'm going to lose my wife to this stranger.
And that's
But
the
the
John Majero character, right?
yes.
Yeah, I like him a lot. He's
Oh, he
cool.
was fantastic in this movie.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
he
like
was
you
great
don't.
in Umbrella Academy and one of my all-time
Oh
favorite
yeah.
shows, Orange is the New Black.
Yes. He has a great filmography. But so yeah, you at the end of the movie, she ends up, staying with her white husband, and the whole time you're watching this movie, because you see their like kind of romance,
I
span
see.
over decades, and at one point you're torn because you're rooting for her, and I think his name was So Young in the movie.
Mm,
I need to look up the pronunciation again, but you're rooting for them to get back together. But then you see like her husband who's feeling left behind. You're like, well, actually, I don't want her to leave her husband. And so,
right.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
like,
so it's like
yeah,
real.
yeah, it puts the trope on his head. We're like in all these like romance movies, it's like, okay, they've known each other since they were kids. They have to be together. But then you see how it works out in real life. It's like they barely speak the same language anymore. They don't really know each other that well because they last time they spent significant time together, they were children. So it's like he kind of goes back to Korea and has to, reconcile with the fact that this woman that he's had built up in his head for all these decades is not who she is anymore, and
Yeah,
he
it's the
has to move
idea
on.
of that woman.
Yeah.
People do that. They
So,
fall in love with the idea of a person instead of the actual person.
yeah, so a romance is not really on brand for me to put in one of my favorite movies,
Yeah, Miss
but this
Doom and Gloom.
but this movie was so beautiful. It was like such a realistic portrayal of that situation of like
First
a
time director
childhood
too.
love coming back. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'll have to check that one out. And I was gonna probably check out some more of the Oscar movies, so that's certainly on my list. Um, but yeah, that's great. Um, cool. Should I go on to my third one? I'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah.
So my third pick, I don't necessarily know if it is maybe my third, if it's my third favorite, absolutely, but it is certainly one I wanted to talk about, and it is the most recent one, and it is a film that came out in 2023, and
Mhm.
it has the distinct honor of being the highest grossing opening weekend for a Black woman director in history, and that is The Marvels, directed by Nia DaCosta.
Yes. Yes.
See, and okay, a lot of people dog The Marvels. I love The Marvels. It's a fantastic movie. It is so much fun. I love Brie Larson. I love Iman Vellani as the as Miss Marvel. And Nia DaCosta does a fantastic job directing this movie. And so not only is it it's the highest grossing film, like I said, directed by a Black woman in history, which tells you how often they have let Black women direct movies. Not very often, unfortunately. And that's why I wanted to make sure to bring up Nia DaCosta, because there are not a lot of examples. There's not a ton until recently examples of women directing movies, let alone women of color and more specifically Black women. Um, but before Nia DaCosta directed this movie, she was actually discovered. I don't know if you know this, by uh, Jordan Peele, and so
Oh
she is
yeah, that was
yeah.
gonna be my final pick.
Oh, you're picking her next
Candyman.
movie? Okay, so perfect. So I was gonna say that she came from Candyman, which is a horror movie. So you have the
Mhm.
same director. Why don't you take it from
Yep.
here and talk about Candyman?
Yeah. So I have to give an honorable mention to one because I did have another one just in case we had like the same director. So
Mhm.
my alternate was going to be The Matrix,
Me
directed
too.
by Lily and Lena Wachowski.
That's my alternate.
Uh, so I'll talk about Candyman, and then I guess we could both talk about The Matrix.
Yeah.
So
Candyman's
Yeah,
perfect
so
though. The same director, but two different movies.
yes,
So I mean, yeah, go right ahead.
yeah, completely different. So it's not a remake of the original Candyman, it's a sequel. So it's kind of the original Candyman, as we all know, came out in again 1992. Beautiful year. But it came out in 92 and was about gentrification in Chicago. And so this current, more updated Candyman has very similar themes, still about gentrification, still about, you know, the Black struggle, but it focuses more on the art world and does not have a white woman main character like the original Candyman did. So it kind
Mhm.
of takes the conversation of gentrification out of the white gaze and kind of puts it more into the community. And Nia DaCosta, Candyman was the first movie I seen from her, and her eye is just amazing. Like the shots were framed so beautifully, and this movie was so creepy. I don't think it lives up to the first, but as its own entity, it's an amazing movie, and I definitely think everyone should watch it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it because I don't watch a lot of horror movies. I never even saw the original one. Uh, but I've heard that it's really good. And I wanted to say a little bit more about Nia DaCosta. And so she's only ever directed 3 movies. The first movie she directed was a movie called Little Woods, and it did really, really well at festivals, and what put her on the map. And it's where Jordan Peele discovered her. But so she's a real, like, she had to work her way up from the bottom. She was working as a production assistant, working on other people's movies, worked all different kinds of crew positions. And somewhere along the way, she became friends with Tessa Thompson. Um, and so Tessa Thompson acts in a short film that she makes called Little Woods, which she then raised enough money via Kickstarter to shoot the whole feature length film of Little Woods. And then it got all this festival attention and all this stuff. And that's what launched her career. So she really had to work hard to prove herself, you know? And that's one thing I wanted to mention is that's why the Marvels, another great thing about the Marvels, which is on my list, is I didn't know this until just recently, but it makes that Valkyrie cameo in the Marvels, starring like from Tessa Thompson, hit much harder because it's not just a callback to, the Marvel universe. It's a personal thing for the director, like because Tessa was like the person that was there from the very beginning in the short film that she made.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to watch that short film. I never heard of it, but that
Yeah,
I love
and
that.
then it became
Love
a
Tessa
feature, Little
Thompson.
Woods. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So yeah, I think that might about cover it. We're sort of running out of time here, unfortunately. Got to get going, but that was a really
Oh, I
good
just have to mention
discussion.
also that Tiana Paris was also in
Yes, in
Candyman,
Candyman. Yeah. Candyman, and
as
then
well as the
she's
Marvels, obviously.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, I thought we said that, but I guess no, you're right, we didn't. A couple quick honorable mentions. I was gonna say, um, you have to mention when you're talking about women directors, you got to mention Penny Marshall, director of Big
Yes.
and League of Her Own. And then also the first woman to ever win an Oscar for Best Director, Catherine Bigelow, for The Hurt Locker, which is a
Yep.
really great movie. Yeah, and so yeah. With that said, my suggestion for next week is I think since it's International Women's Month, we should stay on it. But I want to change
Mm,
mediums, and I want to go with
okay.
top 3 female vocalists,
Okay. Oh,
singers.
that's gonna be a hard one. That's gonna
I
be so
know,
difficult.
so hard, and it's not like it's like written in stone that these are the only 3. So it's just like 3 that you choose that you decide you want to discuss.
Well, I'm gonna have like 30 honorable mentions.
Same. Uh, but all right. With that said, anything else?
No, I think I'm good, but I just gotta say I hope Past Lives wins Best Feature. I know it won't, but fingers crossed. We'll see next week when we talk about the Oscars, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good. And this has been something of a podcast. I've been Mike Gamms here with Kai VonDoom, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
You know, I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. You know, I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.